Da-dun, da-dun. You probably recognize that alternating two-note progression right there. But let me tell you something about Jaws, the novel that was written by Peter Benchley in 1974 and subsequently made into a movie in 1975, directed by Steven Spielberg and famously scored by John Williams. Let me tell you something about Jaws that you probably don't know. It is an ocean conservation story. How many people knew that? I'll repeat. This fictional tale that portrays a massive white shark that menaces the resort island community of Amity is an ocean conservation story. Yes, the iconic film is revered by many. People are indeed mesmerized by sharks, after all. But today I want to focus on the character development in the film in particular, which is probably the central reason the film is so iconic in the first place. The characters, as you'll hear about today, hold lessons that I hope to impart that we can apply more broadly to safeguard our ocean. Let's start with my story, very briefly. Like the Brody family portrayed in Jaws, I grew up in New York City. I was a New York City boy, surrounded by bricks and mortar, but I watched Jaws at a very young age. And in watching Jaws, I fell in love with sharks. I fell in love with the ocean. So I was in New York City, but I was loving these things that were probably closer to my doorstep than I knew about, but still, I was pretty far away from being an ocean kid. With a couple of detours along the way in the arts and psychology in high school and college, I ultimately ended up studying sharks for a living, and a lot of that is owed to Jaws and the influence that it had on me, as well as this book that Allison's going to hand me. Thank you, Allison. It's published in 1977, aging myself a little bit. Time Life Television. I read this book a million times. So this book taught me about sharks, taught me about the ocean, and between that and Jaws, thank you, I fell in love with it. And that's also what landed me at the New England Aquarium, which has been my professional home for the better part of 2 decades now. And if I could just digress for a second about our beloved aquarium, I'm going to, even if you didn't give me permission. Thanks to an amazingly talented staff and over 12,000 critters across 500 plus species, we are thrilling, inspiring, and educating people every single day at our beloved New England Aquarium. But did you know that we also have a bold mission and a major global effort going on around research and conservation to safeguard our ocean? And we have a dedicated Ocean Science and Conservation Institute within our walls called the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life. Yes, aquariums are incredibly important to conservation in our oceans, and they all have a role to play. And ours here in Boston is doing amazing work, so I had to plug that. But now back to Jaws. So one thing I didn't learn at a young age, as evidenced here by my 2 daughters looking horrified, is not to watch it at such a young age. But I made them watch it anyway. They're watching the opening bite scene right here. Let's call it a generational rite of trauma. That's probably the best way to describe it. Now, while my girls, who are now 13 and 15, should have been, to quote a line from the movie, in the yard, not too far from the car, for those of you that know all the lines like I do, I planted them in front of the TV instead to watch the bather, Chrissy Watkins, get devoured by the fictional white shark. Probably Father of the Year, it's a trophy I'm not going to get anytime soon, but suffice it to say, I did it anyway. So even if you're just a casual fan of Jaws, it's hard to forget the contrast or juxtaposition in 2 of the central protagonists in the story. The wealthy, on the left, wealthy intellectual shark researcher from the Oceanographic Institute on the mainland, Matt Hooper, versus the grisly, blue-collar, ex-naval man, Quint, who hunts sharks for a living in both the novel and the film. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying he's also probably the most off-quoted member of the fishing industry in cinematic history. And I have a figurine of him that Allison's holding, and we can pass around for those that want to hang out with Quint. So Hooper and Quint are most definitely polar opposites, and at first not seeing eye to eye on much of anything, with Quint assuming that Hooper is nothing but an entitled elitist. But an interesting evolution starts to happen during the time that they're out at sea hunting this fictional shark. Mutual respect forms, and they realize that this fight with their adversary, this massive shark, is bigger than either of them individually. The relationship represents a metaphor for how differing perspectives, interest groups, or trades can join ranks and create a whole that is far stronger and more effective than the sum of its parts. Unexpected partners gain exponential results. How might we apply that to safeguarding our ocean? Adapting to the impacts from climate change and addressing some of the other big challenges facing our ocean, and we've heard a lot of amazing talks about that tonight, like the shark in Jaws, is an enormous, enormous proposition. But there are solutions. We've heard some really great ones tonight. First, we must acknowledge that all stakeholder groups, and for that matter, all individuals, even if living far from the ocean, hold equity in the health of our blue planet. Unexpected partners gain exponential results. I'd love to share a couple of examples of how this resonates with me in terms of what I've seen in the conservation world on the ocean and how that connects to what's going on in Jaws. So in 2012, along with colleagues at the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries and the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, we undertook a study at the aquarium based on a large grant we received to study the catch and release survival of Atlantic cod in the recreational fishery. This was an important data gap to fill because cod, as most of you know, is an overfished species, and almost every single one that gets caught needs to be thrown back by law. So we wanted to set out and find out how many of them survived. It's an incredibly important question, and we could only accomplish it by working with an actual fishing group. So this is where our partners in Eastman Docks came into the story. Not only did their fleet serve as the authentic fishery platform for the research, but their captain, Captain Nate, very talented young captain, served as our captain for the work. He was our guide and mentor, helping our projects get on the fish, so to speak, but he was so much more than that. He contributed huge contributions to the experimental design of our studies. He asked questions that made the research more applicable to management, and he partook in every aspect of the study. He was truly a project partner. Now, this hits on another interesting angle. At first, Captain Nate, as is probably natural for a lot of captains that work in the industry, was a little bit skeptical of working with an environmental organization on a research project. But as the first project moved along, and he found his role solidifying, and he was being recognized and acknowledged for all his contributions, his perspective went from this is their project to this is our project. And it became his project too. And that joint ownership resonated with other members of the fleet and other stakeholder groups. And it's not by coincidence that the project ended with results that were trusted by different stakeholder groups and adopted into fisheries management, and other projects followed. The lesson I've learned, or the main lesson I've learned from working with Captain Nate over the years, is just like Hooper and Quinton Jaws, the fishing industry and the research team, while perhaps needing a little time to assimilate with each other, can build mutual respect for their contributions, even if the basis for doing so might differ, which is often the case. This allows broader goals to transcend the individual needs of the stakeholders involved, and unexpected partners gain exponential results, once again. Another example, this time related to the New England Aquarium's signature global conservation program, the Marine Conservation Action Fund, or MCAF, which is a small grants and fellowship program that provides different types of support to conservation leaders in low and middle income countries around the globe that are taking on some of the most challenging issues facing our ocean, and who reciprocally apply expertise and solutions back that help our programs here at home. One of the leaders in MCAF fellows is Peruvian marine scientist and social entrepreneur Kirsten Forsberg, the founder and director of Planeta Oceano. Kirsten and her team have been working for 15 years to engage communities in ocean conservation in Peru, and one of their flagship projects involves the giant manta ray. Let's go back to 2015. Around that time, a small-scale fisherman in Peru, Captain Edgardo and his crew, where Kirsten and her team were doing their manta ray work, caught a very large animal, 1.5 metric tons, so it's north of 3,000 pounds, and 7 meters across. Huge. Captain Edgardo decided to bring the manta to land, thinking that they would earn a large sum of money, but it ended up only fetching $250 US dollars, as he realized very quickly the cost was far greater than that to him and to his team. The photos of the giant manta hanging from a crane went viral on media platforms and social media, and there were all types of reactions and recrimination from the environmental community. Captain Edgardo, who was just doing his job to feed his family, didn't know about the imperiled status of the manta ray, felt scared with all the attention, and at one point thought he was even going to go to jail. He put his phone away and ignored calls. Instead of adding to the chorus villainizing Captain Edgardo, however, Kirsten and her team reached out to him, ultimately visited his home, asked him to join her efforts to build an alternative livelihood program for fishers focused on manta ray ecotourism in northern Peru. Not only did Captain Agardo sign on to the initiative, but he is now one of the manta ray's greatest advocates and ambassadors, collaborating with research and conservation programs, and along with members of his family, conducting outreach to fishers, schools, and the broader community, both in Peru and more recently neighboring Ecuador. Kirsten and her team, as well as Captain Agardo, leaned in and listened to different perspectives, and due in great part to their mutual efforts, the manta ray is now legally protected from harvest in Peruvian waters. Unexpected partners gain exponential results. So just to close, these are two examples of many. One of our core values at the New England Aquarium is that we balance, meaning creating approaches that balance ocean use and preservation. There's an incredible amount of hope and potential for ocean preservation if the conservation community employs, and this is important, an empathy mindset. Let's avoid colonial science and parachute conservation. Let's embrace the needs and perspectives of coastal communities, industries, and people that rely on the ocean. We must ensure they are co-pilots in the mission, navigating the journey, not just bystanders at the mercy of its course and destination. We all have something to contribute to making our ocean healthier, and we all have something to gain from doing so. Unexpected partners gain exponential results. Hooper and Quint leaned in, and while things didn't work out so well for Quint in the end, unfortunately, spoiler alert, he was eaten, for those of you that don't know. The Jaws metaphor can teach us a great lesson about the human element and how embracing different needs and perspectives can help in the pursuit to save our ocean. Thank you.